This is CNN Breaking News.
All right, we want to welcome our viewers in the United States and around the world. This is New Day. It is Wednesday, January 9th, 6 o'clock here in New York. And we do begin with breaking news in the Mueller investigation. A source tells CNN that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein is expected to leave the Justice Department in the coming weeks once a new attorney general is confirmed. Rosenstein has been overseeing Robert Mueller's Russia investigation for more than a year now, ever since Jeff Sessions recused himself. Rosenstein has been a target of President Trump's on Twitter. President Trump recently reposted an image of Rosenstein and other DOJ officials behind bars.
So with Rosenstein gone, it means that the Mueller investigation will be overseen by people who have expressed open and public hostility to at least some of the probe. And this news comes at the same time as a major development, a direct link between the most senior levels of the Trump campaign and Russian intelligence. Lawyers for former Trump campaign chair Paul Manafort, they inadvertently revealed that Manafort shared internal polling data with an associate tied to Russian intelligence. So does this constitute collusion? And about last night, the president's Oval Office address making the case for a border wall. The New York Times called it a 9-minute speech that made no new arguments but included multiple misleading assertions. The Times also reported the president didn't want to give the speech in the first place because it wouldn't change any minds. So, was he right? This as the government shutdown enters its 19th day.
All right, so much news, so let's get right to the breaking news with CNN crime and justice reporter Shimon Prokupecz, John Avlon, and former federal prosecutor Laura Coates. Okay, Laura, let's just jump right in. So Bill Barr is expected, his confirmation hearings are expected to begin January 15th, which means that a confirmation vote at the earliest would be in February, and that's when Rod Rosenstein would exit. So what is your take on all this news?
You know, it's not surprising that Rod Rosenstein may be at his wit's end with the Justice Department, especially given his track record and his conversation with the President of the United States. But what is really surprising is that he would leave the Mueller investigation in the hands of somebody who has already been quite adamant and quite outspoken about his views about Mueller and overstepping his bounds. One would think that Rosenstein would feel very reluctant to do so, given the fact that at his last open press conference, he spoke about the idea of how the American people, once they have all the information, will feel very, very trusting of the Department of Justice, and that they should feel confident that whatever is found was evidence-based. Now, when you have him leaving, you wonder, is it in good hands? Will Mueller's probe be able to go in a way that's unfiltered, unfettered? Will it be able to continue in its way? On the other side, the optimistic part of it may say, Allison, look, maybe the reason Rosenstein is able to leave is because he feels that by that time, the Mueller probe may be concluded or in a position to no longer be derailed by anyone, even if they have viewpoints that are outspoken to date.
It seems impossible that Rod Rosenstein was going to stay there forever, but what this does signify is the complete turnover of oversight of the investigation to people who have expressed open and public hostility to at least some parts of it. Matt Whitaker is the acting attorney general on this very network. He said that the investigation could and should be shut down by other means. And Bill Barr, who is a former attorney general, John, has also pointed out that he thought the firing of James Comey was justified. There are a lot of people who have made that case, but this is a guy who could be the next attorney general. He has also made the case, and this is full screen 401 here, that Mueller should not be able to demand that the president submit to an interrogation about alleged obstruction. If embraced by the department, this theory would have potentially disastrous implications, not just for the presidency, but for the executive branch as a whole and the department in particular. Basically, again, Rod Rosenstein, who has had oversight and allowed the investigation to go on, leaves. People who have expressed the willingness to curtail it enter.
This sets up a real race against the clock. What Rosenstein is saying is he wants to leave around the time Barr comes in. Barr's confirmation hearing begins next week. We can expect, if it goes smoothly, and by the way, this also dramatically increases the pressure on that confirmation hearing, and the questions he'll receive about that extensive memo he wrote with this broad vision of executive power that must have been music to Donald Trump's ears. It ratchets up the timing and the pressure because Mitch McConnell has refused to allow a vote on the so-called Mueller protection bill. This means, as you've said, once Barr comes in, as he presumably will in around a month and change time, that the Mueller investigation could be in jeopardy. So does it increase pressure on getting documents out? What does Rosenstein know that makes him comfortable to leave at this time? Or is it simply a deference to Barr, a respected former AG who should be inclined to pick his own deputy?
Shimon, some of the reporting out there this morning, this from ABC, says that Rod Rosenstein had always planned to leave. Right. He wasn't going to do this permanently. He was going to give it. He had always planned, I think, to do this for 2 years. That time is up. So maybe he does think that the investigation will be in good hands.
Right, and he would know that, right? He's the man overseeing this investigation, so he certainly would know when this is coming to an end. And there is a lot of word that this will be coming to an end, sometime perhaps around February, and that is when he plans to leave. We certainly have always gotten the sense that Rod Rosenstein wanted to see this investigation through. That is, he wanted to see the Russia investigation to its conclusion. So this could mean that he now knows that there's going to be an end game here shortly, and therefore he's comfortable enough to leave once this investigation is over. The other big question here is the report. What eventually happens with this report? It now will fall in the hands of the new Attorney General and perhaps the new Deputy Attorney General, whoever that may be. That's going to be an important position as well. What happens to that report? Does it ever get public? Does the new AG try to suppress it in any way? That is going to be a big topic of discussion going forward. Look, a lot is happening as this Russia investigation comes to an end. And certainly a new AG will be overseeing whatever fallout there is, and also other parts of this investigation that have been sent out to different attorney generals across the country, certainly parts of it in the New York office of the Southern District.
One last point on this subject. The confirmation hearing next week for Bill Barr, it just raises the stakes for that. This is a public hearing over several days. You need to watch this, people, to hear the questions that he will be asked about his views on the investigation and how he answers them. That will be huge.
And I do want to point out one more thing, because he had been publicly in favor of Robert Mueller. So Bill Barr, while he has said that he believes there should be limits, and you read that about how he doesn't think that the president should be subject to interrogation about obstruction of justice, here's something else, P403. This is Bill Barr talking about Robert Mueller when he was appointed. His appointment is good news for those concerned over the troubling way the investigation was handled over the summer and fall, as well as the many government leaks, Barr told this news organization. He added, "I'm confident that Robert Mueller will keep his eye on legitimate areas of inquiry and not let this investigation degenerate into a sprawling, ceaseless witch hunt to get something on the president's associates." So in May of 2017, John, he felt very good about Robert.
Well, it's funny he said the word witch hunt, because, of course, that's been the president's constant refrain. I will say that a lot of conservatives at the appointment of Mueller praised his professionalism. The fact he did come from a Republican background. That chorus has dwindled among conservatives to a precious few. So the pressure's ratcheted up, and this is a race against the clock.
And that statement came before he wrote a 20-page memo. He wrote a 20-page memo outlining the unsolicited memo outlining why he thinks the Mueller investigation should be curtailed. Laura, if I can, I want to get to the other major breaking news over the last 24 hours, which is this inadvertent revelation. I guess inadvertent. To me, it seems impossibly inadvertent.
It's advertent.
That Paul Manafort's lawyers revealed that Paul Manafort had delivered private polling information to this man, Konstantin Kilimnik, who has known ties to Russian intelligence. Your reaction?
I mean, why would anyone possibly think, John, that there was collusion between a top campaign official and someone linked to the Kremlin? I mean, what could possibly have given anyone that impression, but for the fact that they actually were able to provide polling information to a nation that had not only internet trolls who were trying to have and sow division in the United States of America and seeking about ways to most effectively be able to influence an American election. I mean, you have a direct link here, really, for the first time. And keep in mind, Manafort was not charged for his conduct related to things that happened while he was the campaign chairman in those Virginia and D.C. cases. They alluded and they were tangentially in many ways related to his finances, and you could bridge a gap between his finances and, of course, what he was doing on the campaign. But this is probably the most direct link we have right now to two things. Number one, that there was a polling pipeline of information going on, and number two, that there was a Ukrainian peace plan that was being crafted while Manafort was overseeing the RNC convention, when they actually had a change of tide when it came to the Ukrainian peace plan and Ukrainians' role with Russia. And so you've got this link of collusion here. And while you talk about being inadvertent, unfortunately, to err is human. To be a lawyer is sometimes human in many respects. This happens far too often in terms of people having inadvertently disclosed information. But at this high level, you're right. It's absolutely shocking. But what is more shocking is that Manafort said, well, I may have inadvertently lied to the Mueller probe and their team, but I didn't inadvertently give information involving polling data to people who are linked to the Kremlin.
Shimon, this is huge. I mean, it's just huge because for all of the questions over all of these past months about collusion, here is, now we know because this what was supposed to be redacted wasn't redacted, that Robert Mueller believes that the Trump campaign chairman handed over polling data to the guy who is mistake. And so what else is the definition of collusion?
This is probably the clearest sign we've yet seen that during the campaign, information that was secret to the campaign, polling data, internal polling data, was being shared with the Russians. For all intents and purposes, this probably went all the way up to the Kremlin, to Vladimir Putin. The man that he was sharing this information with, the FBI has said, is part of Russian intelligence, has deep reaches into the Kremlin. This is a man, his name is Konstantin Kilimnik, that Paul Manafort has had business dealings with. This is a man that has been charged by the special counsel's office, and in the court papers, they say that he has ties to Russian intelligence. What reason and what purpose would Paul Manafort have for sharing polling data with the Russians? The only plausible reason is that during this time, during the 2016 campaign, as we know from the Mueller investigation and indictments, that the Russians were launching their own social media campaign, obviously targeting specific communities, demographics, areas of this country. Did they in any way use any of this information that Paul Manafort provided them in their social media campaign? We don't know. And that is certainly something I'm sure that the Mueller team has been looking at. And if that is the case, that is a complete game changer and will definitely change how everyone views this entire investigation.
Sure, and this is the most direct contact we've seen. And remember, it comes against a backdrop of Paul Manafort hotly denying there were any contacts between him or the Russians. And, this individual, Kilimnik, is Manafort's longtime business partner in Ukraine when he was working for the pro-Putin candidate in those, hotly contested elections. So the real question will be, what did they do with the polling data? But the fact that it comes against those denials that we've seen for so long, and that pattern of people in the Trump orbit denying any connections with Russians and then being confronted with facts just adds more fuel to the fire. But this is the most direct contact.
Well, we also know where Paul Manafort wanted some of that information to go. He wanted Kilimnik to give it to this man, Oleg Deripaska, who was good friends with Vladimir Putin. So he wanted it to go to the highest levels near Putin. And when everyone's calling this the most direct contact between the Trump campaign and Russia's intelligence or the Russian government, only there is one other contact that became apparent yesterday, which is Natalia Veselnitskaya, who was the Russian lawyer at the Trump Tower meeting. We now know because of a court filing yesterday, the prosecutors believe she is directly tied and worked in coordination with the Russian government in other scenarios. And I want to leave you all with this statement from President Donald Trump in February of 2017 about contact with Russians. Listen.
I have nothing to do with Russia. To the best of my knowledge, no person that I deal with does.
Laura, that's just not true.
Well, it's just not true any longer, although he could kind of go, well, I said to the best of my knowledge, I didn't know about Manafort. But what we do know is that there were several people, even you talk about Natalia Veselnitskaya, in that Trump Tower meeting, who, if you remember, the email that got Don Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort to arrive is because they promised information from the Crown prosecutor in Russia. Now we know from yesterday's hearing and yesterday's obstruction of justice charge against that adoption lawyer that she not only had ties, but she worked in cahoots in her new pleading involving a money laundering scheme, working in connection with somebody who was a prosecutor in Russia. So you know that every time somebody has denied this kind of false amnesia about their connection with people in Russia, it always turns out to be false, and Mueller and the team has evidence.
These Mueller breadcrumbs are starting to turn into a sandwich. If you take them all
You have a Mueller
together.
sandwich coming down the front?
Yeah, that's right.
Someone's ordered a Mueller.
Thank you very much. In just hours, President Trump will once again meet with congressional leaders in the Situation Room to resume those negotiations over funding for his proposed border wall and reopening the federal government, which, of course, has been shut down now for 19 days. This comes after the president made a direct appeal to Americans last night in a fact-challenged primetime address from the Oval Office. CNN's Joe Johns has been following it all. He is live at the White House with more. What's the latest, Joe?
Good morning, Allison. The president's Oval Office address was essentially a sales pitch complete with campaign themes, notable for a couple things. He did make a number of false and misleading statements. He did not declare a national emergency. The question now is whether he changed any minds that would help build his wall on the southern border or reopen the parts of the government that are closed.
This is a humanitarian crisis, a crisis of the heart and a crisis of the soul.
President Trump appealing to the nation to support his long-promised border wall, painting a dark picture of undocumented immigrants and accusing Democrats of leaving the country vulnerable.
How much more American blood must we shed before Congress does its job?
Democratic leadership firing back, accusing the president of fear-mongering and urging him to end the shutdown that has left 800,000 Americans unsure of when they'll receive their next paycheck.
This president just used the backdrop of the Oval Office to manufacture a crisis, stoke fear, and divert attention from the turmoil in his administration.
Both sides appearing no closer to compromise, with President Trump falsely claiming Democrats wanted a steel wall.
At the request of Democrats, it will be a steel barrier rather than a concrete wall.
And insisting that Democrats do not support border security, even though the House voted in favor of $1.3 billion for border security and technology last week. The president also making this false claim about funding for the wall.
The wall will also be paid for indirectly by the great new trade deal we have made with Mexico.
But the new deal has not been ratified, and there's no guarantee it would generate revenue or that Congress would earmark it for the wall. President Trump backing up his dire warnings with grisly stories of crimes blamed on undocumented immigrants.
Over the years, thousands of Americans have been brutally killed by those who illegally entered our country.
But Border Patrol statistics show that illegal southern border arrests are near the lowest point in almost 20 years. And multiple studies have found that as immigration has gone up, crime has gone down. One Texas study found that undocumented immigrants are less likely to commit crimes than U.S. citizens. The president also pointing to the opioid epidemic as part of his pitch.
Every week, 300 of our citizens are killed by heroin alone, 90% of which floods across from our southern border.
While these statistics are true, the majority of heroin that comes across the border is smuggled through legal points of entry, meaning that a border wall would likely do little to help. Democrats quick to pounce on the administration's credibility issues.
Sadly, much of what we heard from President Trump throughout this senseless shutdown has been full of misinformation and even malice. The president has chosen fear.
The president's speech comes amid signs that patience for the shutdown among GOP senators is wearing thin, with multiple Republican lawmakers now signaling that they favor reopening the government as border negotiations continue.
These are people who work hard, and they deserve to know that they're going to be paid.
The president heads to Capitol Hill today to attend the traditional Tuesday policy luncheons with Republicans. On Thursday, he's expected to fly down to the southern border for what is likely to be another sales pitch for his wall. John, back.
All right, Joe Johns for us at the White House. Another new development on all of this overnight. The New York Times reporting the president never wanted to give this speech to begin with because he didn't think it would change any minds. So was he right? New signs of breaks in Congress. That's next. In just hours, President Trump will meet with Senate Republicans on Capitol Hill before meeting with bipartisan congressional leaders in the Situation Room to resume talks on funding his proposed border wall. Last night, the president made his pitch directly to the American people in an address that was riddled with things that were not factual. Joining us now, former White House press secretary under President Bill Clinton, Joe Lockhart, former White House director of legislative affairs under President Trump, Mark Short, and our very own John Avlon. Mark, the New York Times reported overnight that the president was saying he never wanted to give this speech to begin with. He was convinced it would not change any mind. So make your best case that what we heard from the president last night changed minds.
I think it was good the president delivered the remarks he did. I think being able to outline a broader vision of what we need for border security was important and not singularly focused on the wall. But I do believe that probably at this point the two sides are pretty well entrenched, and it's going to be difficult to change minds on Capitol Hill. But I still think it's important for the president to speak to the American people and to make his case as he did last night.
Joe, the president focused a lot on the opioid crisis, as he should, as he promised he would as a candidate, as so many American families, my own included, are affected by this. But he made claims that were not true.
Sure.
So most of the heroin that comes from Mexico comes through legal ports of entry. It's hidden in tractor trailers or in passenger cars. So a wall is not going to fix that. These are legal ports of entry. You know what would fix that are those density meters that people have called for, including John Kelly, chief of staff. So the president said that his ask to Congress includes new technology that would help detect that, more agents, more medical personnel to treat the humanitarian crisis. That's what the Democrats want. So if they could somehow get past the border wall, this is exactly what is needed. If we're actually going to fight the heroin coming in, that's right. But that was a sentence in his speech.
Yeah, you know, listen, I think when you look at this speech, it's the definition of being disingenuous. You're exactly right on the opioid crisis, this having nothing to do with it. What's going on at the border is actually working. In Joe John's piece, we saw that we're at historic low levels. In the early 2000s, there were 5,000 Border Patrol agents. There's now 22,000. That part is working. What the Democrats, and not just the Democrats and Republicans have agreed in both the House and the Senate is we need more money for other things.
Because the drug part is not working.
Yeah, and
we all agree on that. The drugs coming in is not working.
The humanitarian crisis, a lot of this has been created by the policy of separating children from their families. You know, but all of this is about politics. There are two things that struck me. I've never seen an Oval Office address that was both preceded and followed by a text from the President of the United States saying, please donate to my campaign because of this speech, because of this speech.
He was fundraising off of it.
Yeah, he was certainly fundraising off. The second thing is no one's mind was changed last night in the public. This game is about the United States Senate and the Republicans. They are beginning to peel off. So the real question, that's why the real important thing today is that caucus lunch.
That he's meeting with Senate Republicans.
Can he hold Senate Republicans together? That's what matters here.
And we saw two addresses last night, one from the president, one from Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. Not a performance, by the way. However, the most important statements may have been from Lisa Murkowski. Yeah. Yes. You know, the Republican senator from Alaska who says she doesn't think that we should shut the government down while passing these appropriations bills. Senator Capito from West Virginia is saying the same thing, John.
Yeah, look, we are 2 days away from this being the longest shutdown in American history. And that's the big problem, that the senators are beginning to feel that pressure because there's no good reason and no clear exit ramp. The reason the president was saying privately, as reported by the New York Times, that he didn't think this would change any minds is the speech wasn't designed to. He talked about a crisis of the soul, a crisis of the heart, but this was an American carnage speech designed to demonize undocumented immigrants and rally the base around him. And to a degree unlike anything we've ever seen. And unfortunately, what's also intentionally being obscured is the fact that study after study after study has shown that undocumented immigrants are less likely to commit violent crimes per capita than native-born Americans. Can't say that enough in the context of fear-mongering that we're seeing from the office and the fundraising off it. So we'll see if Republicans, keep feeling the pressure. The problem is, as the president plays to the base, Congress and the Senate isn't comprised solely of people whose constituents are from the base. And there should be an opportunity to build a broader argument, a broader comprehensive deal. But the president seems disinterested in that.
So, Mark, it was funny last night. The president's broken his promise that Mexico would pay for the wall. Okay, so that's over. He doesn't really talk about that anymore. Last night he said the wall will pay for itself, which I thought was a funny pivot away. And so, again, today, with those Senate Republicans who are getting uncomfortable with the government being shut down, will they move off of the wall? Will they start to finally talk about all of this bigger plan, proposal?
Well, look, I certainly hope they do, Allison. Yesterday, when you were on the show, we talked about the fact that the administration has asked for more judges and has asked for more ICE agents, and has asked for additional resources that haven't been provided. And that is the broader message I think he made. And, in all candor, last night when I was watching the post-speech coverage from CNN, they were saying these are all things that Democrats support. And that's patently false. It's patently false. I was in the room when we asked for more judges, and Democrats said no. I was in the room when we asked for more ICE agents. This was before Democrats in the midterm decided that they wanted to abolish ICE, and they said no. I was in the room when we asked for more detention beds, and Democrats said no. So, yes, they supported him before Trump was president, but they've opposed every element of that. And that is the broader border security message the president should be giving. And I was glad he did it last night. I do think that at this point, the two sides are pretty well entrenched. And so I'm not sure it's going to change any votes in the Senate right now.
Let me just follow up on a couple of things you just said. One, you do concede that the Democrats would agree to $1.3 billion in additional funding for border security that doesn't include the wall. They did agree to that much, and many have indicated on our show they would agree to more than that if it did include a wall. You concede that point.
Absolutely, John, but I also tell you that they supported fencing before Trump was president.
I understand that, but I'm just trying to figure out where we are and where we go from here. You also made a point, and I listened to every word you say very carefully. One of the first reasons you said the president's speech was effective is because it focused on other things besides the wall. And what I'm hearing there, perhaps from you, someone still close to the administration who worked very, very hard inside the administration, is there room for a deal then over the next few days, an agreement on areas besides the wall? If Democrats and the president sit down and say, okay, we'll make it $2.5 billion, but not for the wall, do you think that the White House would agree to that over the next few days?
I think not right now, John. I think that the reality, again, is that the administration should have made this case earlier on that this is what border security has been asking for. And it's been branded too much as Trump's wall, which I think politically makes it very difficult for any Democrat to support it. That's where we are today, and I think it's very difficult to break that impasse.
But he won't accept anything without a wall. Because the shutdown is over the wall. That's what the shutdown is over, period. Full stop. We all agree on that.
I think that is accurate, but I think, again, I do believe that it's actually broader than the wall. It is centered on the wall, but there's been additional requests for funding that are broader for border security that Democrats have refused. Maybe there's a pathway forward on those elements, John, but so far they've been unwilling to give more detention beds or more funding for ICE agents or more of the funding for immigration.
But again, he's been unwilling to do anything without a wall, correct? I just want to make sure I'm not mistaken here. The president has been unwilling to end. No, I'm talking about in the last 2 weeks. He has made clear that no wall, no deal. So he won't budge on the wall, as far as you know, this morning.
That's what I believe the case is, yes.
John?
Well, and Mark, just, you were talking about how you were in the room and Democrats pushed back on refused requests for additional judges and beds. But, it seems that only 9 or so months ago, the Democrats were willing to offer significantly more money for border security, roughly $5 billion, it was reported, in exchange for deals on the Dreamers, this broader vision of immigration reform. Is that true? Did they offer that extra amount? And is there still that possibility for a broader deal that could give us a win for the nation and a way out of the shutdown?
John, I think that would be terrific if we could reach that broader deal. I don't know that that's there on the table right now. It's whether or not all Democrats would support that, I don't know. But I think that some of the reporting has been a little misplaced here in that it wasn't simply the $25 billion larger border security for the DACA population. What happened is that quickly the Democrat legislation included those who were parents of DACA participants, those who maybe were eligible who didn't apply. And so the population mushroomed. But it's a fair argument to say that that's something the administration should put on the table. And in all candor, one of the things I wish the president said last night as well is I've heard him talk about the need to have a guest worker program because he says we're at 3.6% unemployment. And the reality is we need more labor in our country. And that would help alleviate some of the crisis at the border. That is something I think the president should be more forthcoming in saying he supports, because I do think there's a possibility for partnership with Democrats on that. that.
Joe, honestly, it's so interesting when we listen to Mark because it sounds like everybody's closer than the intractable situation that we find ourselves with the government shutdown. Here are the people that have expressed parting from the president's insistence on this shutdown. Lisa Murkowski, so these are the GOP senators. Lisa Murkowski, Shelley Moore Capito, Cory Gardner, Susan Collins, Manu Raju also spoke with Marco Rubio, Steve Daines, John Boozman, Pat Roberts, who've all expressed that they could be on board with allowing the federal agencies to open. So today, when he meets with Senate Republicans, do you think that there will be a break in the impasse?
I don't know that it'll happen today, but I think this is where that's the end game here, that Senate Republicans will eventually abandon him because the pressure will be too strong. I mean, the only thing I'd object to that Mark was saying was somehow that others have branded this about the wall. Trump has branded about this wall. And let's remember, the government is shut down today for tomorrow, I think will be the longest, because Roger Stone in 2015 said, build a wall as a way to remind Trump to bring up immigration. This is not a long-held philosophy. This isn't something that he was burning to do as President of the United States. This was a little mnemonic device, not policy, to get him to remember to do a lot of anti-immigrant stuff.
Joe Lockhart, Mark Short, John Avlon, thanks for being with us this morning. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
A daring helicopter rescue caught